The black boy is in front of the lawyer's office. He was humiliated. But when the lawyer finds out who the boy is, he is shocked. Monday morning in New York was like any other for Jasper Whittaker. The sun had barely risen when he stepped out of his luxury apartment on the Upper East Side, wearing an impeccable suit and carrying an Italian leather briefcase. His steps were hurried, echoing on the still empty sidewalks of the city that never sleeps. Jasper checked his wristwatch for the third time in 5 minutes. A crucial meeting awaited him, and he couldn't afford to be late. His eyes, normally attentive to every detail, barely registered the people he crossed paths with. To him, they were just obstacles on his way to success. Turning a corner, Jasper almost tripped over a small human obstacle. A boy, no more than 10 years old, was standing in the middle of the sidewalk, holding a box of sweets. "Hey, mister, do you want to buy some sweets?" "They're to help my school," said the boy, his voice trembling slightly. Jasper looked down, irritation evident in his piercing blue eyes. The boy was thin, with unkempt brown hair and clothes that looked like they had seen better days. His green eyes, large and hopeful, met Jasper's for a moment. "Out of the way, kid," Jasper growled, pushing the boy aside with more force than he intended. The box of sweets fell to the ground, scattering its contents all over the sidewalk. The lawyer didn't even look back, leaving the boy alone to collect the sweets. If he had, he would have seen tears forming in the boy's eyes, mixed with an expression of hurt and resignation that no child should carry. 20 minutes later, Jasper entered his office at Whittaker Associates, one of New York's most prestigious law firms. His secretary, Emily, was waiting for him with a cup of black coffee and a stack of documents. "Good morning, Mr. Whittaker," she said, handing him his coffee. "Your meeting with the Apex Corp executives starts in 10 minutes in the conference room." Jasper nodded, picking up the documents. "Any messages?" Emily hesitated for a moment. "Well, there is one thing. Dominic Reeves called. He said it was urgent and asked you to come back as soon as possible." The name made Jasper freeze. Dominic Reeves, his best friend from law school, the man he hadn't seen or spoken to in almost a decade. "Dominic?" Jasper muttered, more to himself than to Emily. Memories flooded his mind. Study nights, shared dreams, promises of eternal friendship. And then, the gradual drifting apart, the divergent career choices, the ever longer silences. "Mr. Whittaker," Emily's voice brought him back to the present. "The meeting." "Yes, of course." Jasper quickly pulled himself together. "I'll deal with it later. Let's go to the meeting." The next 2 hours were a blur of negotiations, contracts, and legal strategies. Jasper was in his element, his sharp mind dissecting every clause, anticipating every move of the Apex Corp executives. But somewhere in the back of his mind, Dominic's voice echoed, a persistent reminder of an almost forgotten past. When the meeting was finally over, Jasper returned to his office and closed the door. He stared at the phone for a long moment before finally picking up the receiver and dialing the number Emily had written down. The phone rang once, twice. On the third, a familiar voice, albeit more tired than Jasper remembered, answered. "Hello? Dominic, it's Jasper." There was a pause on the other end of the line, so long that Jasper almost thought the call had dropped. "Jasper," Dominic finally answered, his voice a mixture of relief and apprehension. I wasn't sure if you'd call back." "What happened, Dominic?" Emily said it was urgent. Another moment of silence, and then, "It's about Aiden, my son." Jasper frowned. He vaguely remembered Dominic mentioning that he had a son years ago. "What about him?" "He's missing, Jasper, for 3 years." Jasper's world seemed to stop for a moment. 3 years? Dominic, why didn't you look for me before?" "I tried, Jasper. In the beginning. But you were always busy, always in important meetings. And then, well, then it seemed too late." The guilt hit Jasper like a punch in the gut. He remembered all the times he'd ignored Dominic's calls, all the times he'd prioritized his work over everything and everyone else. I'm sorry, Dominic. I didn't know." "It's not your fault," Dominic replied, but there was a note of bitterness in his voice. "Look, I don't care about making you feel guilty. It's just, I'm desperate, Jasper. The police gave up a long time ago. I need help." Jasper closed his eyes, remembering the boy in the street this morning. An uncomfortable feeling began to form in his chest. "What's he like, Dominic?" "Aiden. He's 10 now. Brown hair, green eyes. He was always a skinny kid, you know. And he had this thing about biting his lip when he was nervous." The description made Jasper's heart race. It couldn't be. Could it? "Dominic, I have to go. But I'll help you, okay? I promise." As soon as he hung up, Jasper grabbed his coat and ran out of the office, ignoring the confused looks from his colleagues. He had to get back to that street. He had to find that boy. As he ran through the streets of New York, Jasper felt something he hadn't felt for years. Fear. Fear of being wrong. Fear of being right. Fear that his indifference might have cost him more than he had ever imagined. When he finally reached the corner where he had found the boy, Jasper stopped, panting. His eyes searched the area, desperate for a glimpse of those green eyes, those tousled brown hair. And then, there he was. Sitting on the steps of a building, the box of sweets by his side, the boy stared into nothingness with an expression of defeat that broke Jasper's heart. With hesitant steps, Jasper approached. The boy looked up, recognition and fear flashing through his eyes. "Hi," Jasper said softly, kneeling down to get on the boy's level. I'm sorry about what happened earlier. What's your name?" The boy hesitated for a moment before replying quietly, "Aiden." And at that moment, Jasper knew that his life would never be the same again. The name Aiden echoed in Jasper's ears like an alarm bell. He stood there, kneeling on the sidewalk, looking at the boy with a mixture of shock and disbelief. The world around him seemed to have slowed down, the noise of the city turning into a distant hum. "Aiden," Jasper repeated softly, as if testing the sound of the name. "It's a nice name. How old are you?" The boy hesitated, his green eyes scanning Jasper with a mixture of caution and curiosity. 10, he finally answered, his voice low and husky. Jasper felt his heart squeeze. 10 years, just as Dominic had said. He took a deep breath, trying to keep his composure. "Aiden, I know I didn't get off to a good start this morning, and I'm sorry for that. But I'd like to make amends. How about I buy all your sweets?" Aiden's eyes widened with surprise. "All of them? But why?" "Let's just say it's my way of apologizing," Jasper smiled, trying to sound reassuring. "And maybe we can have a little chat while we eat some. What do you think?" Aiden bit his lip, a gesture Jasper immediately recognized from Dominic's description. After a moment's consideration, the boy nodded slowly. Jasper bought the sweets and guided Aiden to a nearby bench in a small park. As they sat down, he noticed how uncomfortable the boy looked, his eyes constantly scanning the area as if looking for an escape route. "So, Aiden," Jasper began, opening a chocolate bar, "do you live around here?" Aiden shrugged, taking a sweet for himself. "More or less. I move around a lot." "What about your parents? Do they move with you?" The boy tensed, his fingers squeezing the candy tightly. "I don't have parents," he mumbled, avoiding Jasper's gaze. Jasper felt a wave of compassion and guilt. How could he have been so insensitive this morning? "I'm sorry, Aiden. It must be hard." Aiden shrugged again, but Jasper could see the pain in his eyes. "I'm used to it. It's better this way." "Better? What do you mean?" "No one can hurt you if you don't care about anyone," Aiden replied, his voice carrying a sad maturity that was too much for someone so young. Jasper felt his heart break. What had this boy been through to develop such a dark view of the world? He fought the urge to hug Aiden, knowing that it would probably scare him. "Aiden, I know we've only just met, but I want you to know that there are good people in the world, people who care." The boy looked at Jasper, his eyes full of skepticism. "Like you? The guy who pushed me this morning?" Shame hit Jasper like a punch in the gut. "You're right. What I did was wrong, and I'm genuinely sorry. But I'm here now, trying to fix my mistake. Sometimes people make mistakes, but the important thing is to recognize them and try to do better." Aiden seemed to consider Jasper's words for a moment. "Maybe," he finally said, his voice soft. But not everyone tries to fix their mistakes. No, not everyone, Jasper agreed. But some of us try. And sometimes, that makes all the difference. They sat in silence for a few minutes, eating their sweets and watching the people go by. Jasper struggled internally, trying to decide how to broach the subject of Dominic. "Aiden," he began hesitantly, "do you remember anything about your life before you started moving around so much?" The boy tensed again, his eyes becoming distant. "Why do you want to know?" Jasper chose his next words carefully. "Because I think I might know someone who's looking for you. Someone who cares a lot about you." Aiden's eyes widened, a mixture of hope and fear flashing across his face. "Who?" "Your father, Aiden. Dominic Reeves." The name seemed to strike Aiden like a bolt of lightning. He stood up abruptly, knocking the sweets to the floor. "You're lying!" he shouted, tears starting to form in his eyes. "My father doesn't want me. He abandoned me." Jasper stood up too, raising his hands in a placating gesture. "No, Aiden, that's not true. Your father has been looking for you for years. He's desperate to find you." Aiden shook his head violently, tears now running freely down his face. "No! You don't know anything! He left me! He... The boy couldn't finish his sentence, sobs shaking his small body. Without thinking, Jasper knelt down and pulled Aiden into a hug. To his surprise, the boy didn't resist, instead burying his face in Jasper's shoulder and crying openly. "It's okay, Aiden," Jasper murmured, stroking the boy's back. "It's okay to cry. You've been through a lot." They stayed like that for several minutes, Jasper holding Aiden as he cried out years of pain and loneliness. When the sobs finally subsided, Jasper gently pulled Aiden away to look into his eyes. "Aiden, I promise you that I will find out what happened. I'll help you and your father reunite. But first, I need to know where you're living now. Can I take you home?" Aiden hesitated, biting his lip again. "It's not really a house," he muttered. "It's just a place where I stay." Jasper nodded, trying to keep his expression neutral despite the concern he felt. "All right. Can you show me?" Aiden reluctantly agreed, and they started walking. As they walked, Jasper noticed how well Aiden seemed to know the streets, navigating alleyways and shortcuts with ease. Finally, they came to an abandoned building, its windows broken and walls covered in graffiti. "This is it," Aiden said quietly, leading Jasper through a side entrance. The inside of the building was cold and damp, the smell of mold permeating the air. Aiden led them to a corner where an old mattress lay on the floor, covered by a thin blanket. Some clothes were folded carefully beside it, along with a battered backpack. Jasper felt his heart squeeze at the sight of the conditions in which Aiden was living. "Aiden," he said softly, "you can't stay here. It's not safe." The boy shrugged, sitting down on the mattress. "It's better than the streets." Jasper knelt down next to Aiden, looking him in the eye. "Listen, I know you have no reason to trust me, but I want to help. How about you come with me tonight? I have a guest room in my apartment. Tomorrow we can start looking for your father together. What do you think?" Aiden looked at Jasper for a long moment, his green eyes full of conflict. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Okay," he whispered, "but just for tonight." Jasper smiled, feeling a wave of relief. "Good. Let's get your things." As he helped Aiden collect his few belongings, Jasper made a silent promise. He would fix this. He would reunite Aiden with Dominic and find out the truth behind the boy's disappearance. And in the process, maybe he could fix himself too. As they left the abandoned building, the sun was setting, painting the New York sky in shades of orange and pink. Jasper looked at Aiden, who was walking beside him with his backpack on his back, and felt a mixture of determination and hope. This was only the beginning of his journey, but for the first time in years, Jasper felt he was on the right track. Jasper's apartment on the Upper East Side was a study in contrast to the abandoned building where Aiden had been living. Polished wooden floors, modern works of art on the walls, and designer furniture created an atmosphere of luxury and sophistication that made Aiden stop in the doorway, his eyes wide with amazement. "Wow," the boy whispered, his voice barely audible. "You live here alone?" Jasper felt a twinge of guilt as he noticed Aiden's amazement. "Yes," he replied, leading the boy inside. "But today, you're staying here with me?" Aiden nodded silently, his green eyes scanning every detail of the apartment as if trying to memorize everything. Jasper watched him, noticing how small and out of place the boy seemed in the midst of luxury. "Come on, I'll show you where you'll sleep," Jasper said, gently putting a hand on Aiden's shoulder. The boy winced slightly at the touch, but followed Jasper down the corridor. The guest room was spacious and nicely decorated, with a large king-size bed that seemed to swallow Aiden up when he sat down on it hesitantly. "You can make yourself at home," Jasper said, trying to sound reassuring. "There's a bathroom over there," he pointed to a door. "Why don't you take a hot bath while I prepare something for us to eat?" Aiden bit his lip, a gesture that Jasper was beginning to associate with nervousness. I don't have any other clothes," the boy admitted quietly, the shame evident in his voice. Jasper felt his heart squeeze. "Don't worry about it," he said quickly. "I'll see if I can find something that fits you, okay?" After rummaging through his closet, Jasper found an old t-shirt and a pair of shorts that, although still too big, would fit Aiden to sleep in. He left them in the bathroom along with clean towels and went into the kitchen to prepare dinner. While chopping vegetables for a soup, Jasper couldn't help thinking about how drastically his life had changed in just one day. In the morning, he was a successful lawyer focused solely on his career. Now he was looking after a street kid who was possibly the lost son of his former best friend. The sound of soft footsteps brought him out of his thoughts. Aiden was standing in the kitchen doorway, looking tiny in Jasper's oversized clothes, his wet hair falling over his eyes. "Hey," Jasper smiled, trying to look casual. "Feeling better?" Aiden nodded shyly. "Thanks for the clothes," he murmured. "You're welcome. Come on, you can sit here," Jasper indicated one of the high stools around the kitchen island. "The soup will be ready soon." As Jasper finished preparing the meal, he watched Aiden out of the corner of his eye. The boy looked more relaxed after his bath, but there was still an obvious tension in his shoulders, as if he was ready to bolt at any moment. "So, Aiden," Jasper began, placing a steaming bowl of soup in front of the boy. "How long have you been, well, on the streets?" Aiden stirred the soup with his spoon, avoiding Jasper's gaze. "I'm not sure. A long time." Jasper nodded, taking a seat next to Aiden with his own bowl. "And before that? Do you remember where you lived?" The boy tensed, his hand gripping the spoon tightly. "I don't want to talk about it." "All right," Jasper said softly, realizing that he had touched on a delicate subject. "You don't have to if you don't want to. But Aiden, I need you to know that I'm here to help. Your father, Dominic, he's really looking for you." Aiden raised his head abruptly, his green eyes shining with a mixture of hope and fear. "How do you know? How do you know my father?" Jasper took a deep breath, knowing he needed to be honest. "Dominic and I were best friends at law school. We lost touch a few years ago, but he called me today, desperate for help to find you." Tears began to form in Aiden's eyes. But he left me. He didn't want me." "No, Aiden," Jasper said firmly, resisting the urge to hug the boy. "I'm sure there's more to this story. Dominic loves you. He never gave up on finding you." Aiden shook his head violently, tears now streaming down his cheeks. "You don't understand. He sent me away. He said I was a mistake." Jasper's heart broke when he saw the pain in Aiden's eyes. He knew there was more to this story than met the eye, but pressuring Aiden now would only push him away. "Aiden, look at me," Jasper said softly, waiting until the boy met his eyes. "I promise you that we'll find out what really happened. But for now, you're safe here. No one will hurt you or send you away. Okay?" Aiden sniffled, wiping the tears away with the back of his hand. "Okay," he whispered. They finished their meal in silence, Jasper occasionally casting worried glances at Aiden. When they had finished, Jasper took the boy back to the guest room. "Try to get some rest," he said, tucking the blankets around Aiden. "Tomorrow, we'll start sorting all this out, I promise. Aiden nodded sleepily, his eyes already beginning to close. Jasper stood there for a moment, watching the boy fall asleep before quietly leaving the room. Back in the living room, Jasper picked up his phone and dialed Dominic's number. After a few rings, his old friend's anxious voice answered. "Jasper, any news?" Jasper took a deep breath. "Dominic, I've found him. I found Aiden." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line, followed by a muffled sob. Are you sure? Is he all right? Where is he?" "He's here with me, Dominic. He's safe. But..." Jasper hesitated, not wanting to alarm his friend, but knowing he needed to be honest. "There's something wrong. Aiden thinks you abandoned him. He says you sent him away." "What?" Dominic's voice was full of shock and pain. "Jasper, I would never do that. I love my son more than anything in the world." "I believe you, Dom," Jasper said quickly. "But something happened. Something that made Aiden believe that you didn't want him." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Dominic spoke again, his voice was laden with guilt. "Jasper, there's something you need to know. Something I should have told you before." Jasper felt his stomach sink. "What is it, Dom?" "It's about Aiden's mother, and about what really happened the night Aiden disappeared." As Dominic began to tell his story, Jasper felt that he was about to dive into much deeper and more turbulent waters than he had ever imagined. But looking at the room where Aiden slept, he knew there was no turning back. He was committed now, no matter what lay ahead. The night stretched out before him, full of revelations and promises of an uncertain tomorrow. But for the first time in years, Jasper felt that he was exactly where he should be, ready to face whatever fate had in store for him. Jasper woke up, his back sore from sleeping on the sofa. He got up quietly, his thoughts immediately returning to the conversation he'd had with Dominic the night before. His friend's revelations still echoed in his mind, heavy and disturbing. Walking to the guest room, Jasper opened the door softly. Aiden was curled up in the covers, his face relaxed in sleep in a way that Jasper hadn't seen before. For a moment, he stood there, watching the boy and thinking about everything Dominic had told him. Aiden's mother, Sarah, was not the person everyone thought she was. Dominic revealed that she suffered from untreated bipolar disorder, alternating between periods of euphoria and deep depression. The night Aiden disappeared, Sarah was in the throes of a manic episode. Jasper closed his eyes, remembering Dominic's anguished words. "I only went out for half an hour, Jasper. Half an hour to buy her medicine. When I came back, they were both gone." A soft movement on the bed brought Jasper back to the present. Aiden was waking up, his green eyes blinking sleepily. "Good morning," Jasper said softly, entering the room. "How did you sleep?" Aiden sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Fine," he mumbled. "Better than, well, for a long time." Jasper felt his heart squeeze. "Glad to hear it. How about some breakfast? We can talk for a while afterwards if you're up for it." Aiden nodded hesitantly, and Jasper left him to get dressed. In the kitchen, while preparing pancakes and orange juice, Jasper tried to organize his thoughts. How could he broach the subject with Aiden without scaring him off? When Aiden appeared in the kitchen, wearing the same big clothes as Jasper, the lawyer couldn't help noticing how small and vulnerable the boy looked. "Sit down," Jasper smiled, placing a plate full of pancakes in front of Aiden. "Eat as much as you want." They ate in silence for a few minutes, Jasper watching as Aiden devoured the pancakes as if he hadn't eaten for days. He probably hadn't eaten, Jasper thought with a tightness in his chest. "Aiden," Jasper began softly when the boy had finished eating. "I spoke to your father last night." Aiden froze, his eyes wide with fear. Did you tell him where I am?" "No, I didn't," Jasper assured him quickly. "I just said you were safe. But Aiden, there are some things we need to talk about. About what happened the night you disappeared." Aiden lowered his gaze, his hands clenching into fists. "I don't want to talk about it." Jasper took a deep breath. "I know it's hard, Aiden, but it's important. Your father told me about your mother, about her illness." Aiden's eyes filled with tears. She said that Dad didn't want us anymore, that we had to run away." Jasper's heart broke when he saw the pain in the boy's eyes. "Oh, Aiden," he said softly, resisting the urge to hug him. "Your mother was ill. She wasn't thinking clearly." "But she seemed so sure," Aiden sobbed, the tears now running freely down his face. "She said that Dad was going to send us away, that he didn't love me." Jasper moved slowly to Aiden's side, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Aiden, your father loves you more than anything in the world. He never wanted you to leave. He's been looking for you all these years." Aiden looked at Jasper, his eyes full of confusion and hope. "Really?" "True," Jasper confirmed. "Your father never gave up on you, Aiden. He really wants to see you." Aiden bit his lip, an internal battle clearly visible on his face. "And what about my mother?" Jasper hesitated, knowing that the next part would be the hardest. "Aiden, your mother, she passed away 2 years ago. I'm so sorry." The shock and pain that flashed across Aiden's face was heartbreaking. The boy began to tremble, sobs shaking his small body. Without thinking, Jasper pulled him into a hug, holding him as he cried. "It's okay, Aiden," Jasper murmured, stroking the boy's back. "Let it out. I'm here with you." They stayed like that for a long time, Jasper holding Aiden as he cried out years of pain, confusion, and loss. When the sobs finally subsided, Aiden slowly pulled away, wiping his eyes with the sleeve of his shirt. What happens now?" Aiden asked, his voice hoarse from crying. Jasper looked into the boy's eyes, seeing a mixture of fear and hope. "It's up to you, Aiden. Your father really wants to see you, but I'm not going to force you into anything you don't want. We can go slowly, at your pace." Aiden nodded slowly. I think I want to see him, but I'm scared." "It's normal to be scared," Jasper assured him. "But remember, you're not alone in this. I'll be with you the whole time if you want me to." A small smile appeared on Aiden's face, the first Jasper had seen since meeting him. "Thanks, Jasper." Just then, Jasper's phone rang. It was Emily, his secretary. "Mr. Whitaker, sorry to bother you, but Mr. Reeves is here in the office. He says it's urgent." Jasper felt his heart racing. "Is Dominic there? Tell him I'm on my way." Hanging up the phone, Jasper turned to Aiden. "Your father's in my office. Do you want to go with me to see him?" Aiden hesitated, fear evident in his eyes, but then slowly he nodded. "Yes, I do." "All right," Jasper smiled, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Let's get dressed and go together, okay?" As he helped Aiden get ready, Jasper couldn't help thinking about how drastically his life had changed in just 24 hours. From a lawyer focused solely on his career, he now found himself in the role of protector and mediator, about to reunite a father and son separated by years of misunderstandings and tragedy. As they left the apartment, Jasper held Aiden's hand, feeling the boy's trembling. "It's going to be okay," he assured him. "I'm here with you." As they walked towards Jasper's office, the morning sun bathed the streets of New York, as if promising a new beginning. Jasper knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but looking at Aiden, he felt a renewed determination. He would help this family heal, no matter what it took. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it was full of hope. The elevator rose slowly towards Jasper's office, each floor passing as if it were an eternity. Aiden held Jasper's hand tightly, his green eyes fixed on the numbers flashing above the door. Jasper looked at the boy, noticing how his breathing was racing. "It's okay, Aiden," he said softly. "Remember, we can leave at any time if you want." Aiden nodded silently, biting his lower lip. Jasper could feel the trembling in the boy's hands, and his heart squeezed. As a lawyer, he was used to high-pressure situations, but nothing in his career had prepared him for this moment. The elevator finally reached the floor of Jasper's office, the doors opening with a soft ding. Aiden hesitated for a moment before stepping out, still holding Jasper's hand tightly. Emily, Jasper's secretary, greeted them with a curious look, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of Aiden. "Mr. Whitaker, Mr. Reeves is in your office. He seems agitated." Jasper nodded, thanking him silently. He knelt down in front of Aiden, getting on the boy's eye level. "Aiden, your father is just over there. Are you ready?" Aiden swallowed, his eyes filling with tears. What if he doesn't want me anymore? Jasper's heart broke when he heard the fear in the boy's voice. "Aiden, your father loves you more than anything in the world. He's never stopped looking for you. But if you're not ready, we can wait." Aiden closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. When he opened them again, there was a determination that Jasper hadn't seen before. "No, I want to see him." Jasper smiled, feeling an inexplicable pride in the boy. "All right, let's go." They walked together to Jasper's office door. Through the frosted glass, they could see the silhouette of a man pacing back and forth. Jasper took one last look at Aiden, who nodded slightly before opening the door. Dominic Reeves stopped in mid-step, his eyes immediately settling on the small figure next to Jasper. Time seemed to freeze for a moment, father and son staring at each other for the first time in years. "Aiden?" Dominic's voice was only a whisper, laden with emotion. Aiden took a hesitant step forward, his green eyes, so like his father's, filled with tears. "Dad?" In an instant, Dominic crossed the room, falling to his knees and pulling Aiden into a tight embrace. Sobs shook the man's body as he held his son, years of pain and longing finally finding relief. "My boy," Dominic cried, his hands stroking Aiden's hair. "My precious boy, I've missed you so much." Aiden, initially tense, slowly relaxed in his father's embrace, his own tears wetting Dominic's shirt. I thought you didn't want me anymore," he whispered. Dominic pulled away slightly, holding Aiden's face between his hands. "Never, Aiden. Don't ever think that. You're the most important thing in my life. I have never, ever stopped loving you or looking for you." Jasper watched the scene, feeling his own tears forming. He silently moved to leave the room, wanting to give father and son a moment of privacy, but Aiden's voice stopped him. "Jasper?" The boy looked up at him, holding out a hand. "Stay, please." Surprised and touched, Jasper nodded, moving to sit in a nearby chair. Dominic looked at him, gratitude evident in his eyes. "Jasper," Dominic said, his voice breaking. "I don't know how to thank you. You brought my son back to me." Jasper shook his head. "No need to thank me, Dom. I just did what anyone would do." Aiden gently pulled away from his father's embrace, looking between the two men. You know each other?" Dominic nodded, a small smile appearing on his face. "Jasper and I were best friends at law school. He was like a brother to me." Jasper felt a wave of guilt at hearing Dominic's words. "Dom, I'm sorry. I should have been there for you when Aiden disappeared. I was a terrible friend." Dominic shook his head. "No, Jasper. I understand. We both made mistakes. But you're here now, and you brought my son back. That's all that matters." Aiden looked at his father, hesitation in his eyes. "Dad, what happened that night? Why did Mom say you didn't want us anymore?" Dominic closed his eyes, pain evident on his face. He took a deep breath before answering. "Aiden, your mother, she was ill. She had a condition called bipolar disorder. Sometimes it made her think and act in ways that weren't real. But she seemed so right," Aiden whispered, tears running down his cheeks. Dominic pulled Aiden close again. "I know, son, and I'm sorry you had to go through that. I should never have gone out that night. I just wanted to get her medicine. I thought you'd be safe for half an hour." Jasper watched, his heart heavy. He could see the pain in Dominic's eyes, the weight of the guilt he'd been carrying for years. "Dom," Jasper said softly, "it wasn't your fault. You were doing the best you could in an impossible situation." Dominic looked at his friend, gratitude in his eyes. Then he turned to Aiden. "Son, I know we've been through a lot. I know you must be confused and scared. But I promise, if you give me a chance, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for the time we lost." Aiden looked at his father, then at Jasper, as if seeking confirmation. Jasper nodded encouragingly. I want to try," Aidan finally said, his voice small but determined. Dominic let out a sigh of relief, pulling Aidan into another hug. "Thank you, son. Thank you for giving me this chance." Jasper watched the scene, feeling a mixture of joy and melancholy. He knew that the road ahead would be difficult for Dominic and Aidan. Years of separation and trauma would not be overcome overnight. But seeing the love in Dominic's eyes and the hope on Aidan's face, he knew they had a real chance of healing. "Jasper?" Aidan's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. You're still going to stick around, aren't you?" Jasper felt his heart clench at the question. He looked at Dominic, who nodded slightly. "Of course I will, Aidan," Jasper replied, smiling. "If you want me to, I'll be here for both of you." At that moment, looking at the boy who had come into his life just 2 days before and the friend he had found again, Jasper felt something change inside him. He was no longer just a lawyer focused on his career. He was part of something bigger, something more important. As the morning sun shone through the office windows, illuminating the three of them, Jasper made a silent promise. He would be there for this family, helping them navigate the challenges ahead. And in the process, maybe he could also find the redemption he didn't even know he was looking for. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it was full of possibilities. And for Jasper, Dominic and Aidan, that was more than enough for now. The afternoon sun filtered through the windows of Jasper's apartment, casting long shadows over the sofa where Aidan was sitting, absent-mindedly leafing through a book. 2 weeks had passed since their exciting reunion in Jasper's office, and life seemed to have found a new rhythm, albeit fragile and uncertain. Dominic entered the room, carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. His eyes softened at the sight of his son, a mixture of love and guilt always present in his gaze. "Here, Aidan," he said, offering one of the cups. "I thought you might like something sweet." Aidan looked up, a small smile forming on his lips. "Thanks, Dad," he murmured, taking the cup carefully. Dominic sat down next to his son, keeping a respectful distance. The last 2 weeks had been a careful dance of approach and retreat, both trying to rebuild a long-lost relationship. "What are you reading?" Dominic asked, leaning over to look at the book on Aidan's lap. "It's a book about constellations," Aidan replied, his voice gaining a touch of enthusiasm. "Jasper lent it to me. Did you know that there are 88 official constellations?" Dominic smiled, feeling a pang of gratitude for Jasper. His friend had become a crucial bridge between him and Aidan, offering neutral and safe ground for both of them. "No, I didn't know," Dominic replied. "Maybe we can do some stargazing together sometime. What do you think?" Aidan bit his lip, considering the offer. That would be nice," he finally said, a glimmer of hope in his green eyes. The moment was interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. Dominic stood up, frowning. "Strange. We weren't expecting anyone." He opened the door and his face instantly paled. Standing there in the hallway was a middle-aged woman with gray hair and a stern look on her face. "Mrs. Hartley," Dominic whispered, his voice trembling. The woman stared at him with cold eyes. "Hello, Dominic. I see you finally found the boy." Aidan, curious at the commotion, approached the door. At the sight of the woman, he froze, his eyes widening in fear. "Grandma," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Mrs. Hartley, Sarah's mother and Aidan's grandmother, stepped forward. "Aidan, darling, I've finally found you." Dominic instinctively placed himself between Aidan and his grandmother. "How did you find us?" he asked, his voice tense. "Does it matter?" she replied coldly. "What matters is that I'm here to take my grandson home, to his real home." Aidan cowered behind Dominic, gripping his father's shirt tightly. "No," he muttered. "I don't want to go." Mrs. Hartley narrowed her eyes. "Aidan, darling, you don't understand. This man," she pointed at Dominic, "he's the reason your mother left. He abandoned her when she needed him most." Dominic felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. "That's not true," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "I loved Sarah. I tried to help her." "Not hard enough," Mrs. Hartley retorted. "If you really cared, my daughter would still be alive." Aidan looked between his father and grandmother, confusion and fear evident on his face. "Dad," he whispered, his voice broken. Just then, Jasper arrived, taking the stairs 2 steps at a time. He had received an urgent message from Dominic and rushed into the apartment. "What's going on here?" he asked, quickly assessing the situation. Mrs. Hartley turned to him. "And who are you?" "He's my lawyer," Dominic replied quickly. "And a family friend." Jasper stepped forward, his professional posture taking over. "Ma'am, I suggest we continue this conversation in a more appropriate setting. Perhaps we could arrange a meeting in my office?" Mrs. Hartley stared at him for a moment before nodding reluctantly. "Very well, but this isn't over, Dominic. I'm going to fight for custody of Aiden. He deserves to be with someone who really cares about him." With one last icy glance, she turned and left, leaving a heavy silence behind. As soon as the door closed, Aiden collapsed, sobs shaking his small body. Dominic immediately knelt down, pulling his son into a hug. "Shh, it's okay, Aiden," he murmured, stroking the boy's back. "I'm here. I won't let anyone take you." Jasper watched the scene, his heart heavy. He knew that the coming battle would be difficult and painful for everyone involved. "Dom," he said softly, "we need to talk about this. Prepare a strategy." Dominic nodded, still holding Aiden tightly. "I know, but not now. Right now. Aiden needs us." Jasper agreed, moving to sit on the sofa. Aiden, still sobbing, held out a hand to him, and Jasper took it without hesitation. The 3 of them stayed like that for a long time, united in a silent embrace. The shadows in the room grew as the sun set, an apt metaphor for the dark challenges ahead. Later that night, after Aiden had finally fallen asleep, exhausted by the emotional whirlwind of the day, Dominic and Jasper sat in the kitchen, cups of strong coffee in their hands. "She's going to fight with everything she's got," Dominic said, his voice tired. "Margaret always blamed me for Sarah's condition, and now for her death." Jasper sighed, rubbing his eyes. "Dom, we need to be honest here. Is there something you're not telling me about what happened to Sarah?" Dominic was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on his coffee cup. When he finally spoke, his voice was laced with emotion. "The night Sarah took Aiden away, I had filed for divorce," he confessed. "I couldn't take it anymore, Jasper. Her seizures were getting worse. She was refusing to take her medication. I was scared for Aiden." Jasper closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the revelation. "Oh, Dom." "I loved her, Jasper," Dominic continued, tears now streaming freely down his face. "But I didn't know how to help her anymore. I thought that if we split up, maybe she would finally seek help." "But she didn't," Jasper concluded softly. Dominic shook his head. "No. Instead, she ran away with Aiden. And 2 years later..." His voice faltered, unable to complete the sentence. Jasper reached out, squeezing his friend's shoulder. "Dom, you did what you thought was best at the time. We can't change the past, but we can fight for the future. For Aiden's future." Dominic nodded, wiping away his tears. "You're right. But how are we going to explain all this to Aiden? He's been through so much." "With honesty and love," Jasper replied. "Aiden is stronger than we think, and he has both of us by his side now." The 2 friends were silent for a moment, the weight of the revelations and the challenges ahead hanging over them. Outside, New York City continued its frenetic pace, oblivious to the drama unfolding inside that apartment. But in that kitchen, that night, 3 lives were irrevocably intertwined. And while the road ahead seemed dark and uncertain, there was also a spark of hope. A hope that, together, they could overcome any obstacle and build the future that Aiden deserved. The battle for custody of Aiden had only just begun, but Jasper and Dominic were determined to fight with everything they had. Not just for Aiden's sake, but also for the chance at redemption and healing that they all desperately needed. The courtroom was silent, the tension palpable in the air. Jasper adjusted his tie, casting a reassuring glance at Dominic, who was sitting rigidly beside him. Across the hall, Mrs. Hartley stared at them with a cold gaze, her lawyer whispering something in her ear. Aiden was sitting between Jasper and Dominic, his green eyes wide and apprehensive. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind of emotions and revelations for the boy. Jasper remembered the night they had finally told Aiden the full truth about what had happened to his mother. "Aiden," Dominic had said, his voice shaking slightly, "there's something you need to know about the night you and your mother left." The boy looked between his father and Jasper, biting his lip nervously. "What?" Dominic took a deep breath, tears forming in his eyes. "That night, I had asked for a divorce from your mother." Aiden froze, his eyes wide with shock and confusion. "But why?" "Your mother was very ill, Aiden," Jasper interjected softly. "She needed help, but she didn't want to accept it." Dominic nodded, wiping away a tear. I thought that if we split up, maybe she would finally seek the help she needed. I was worried about you, about your safety." Aiden was silent for a long moment, processing the information. When he finally spoke, his voice was small and broken. "So, that's why she said you didn't want us anymore?" Dominic pulled Aiden into a tight hug. "Oh, Aiden, I always wanted you. Always. I just wanted us all to be safe and healthy." Jasper watched as father and son cried together, years of misunderstandings and pain finally coming to the surface. He felt his own tears forming, a mixture of sadness for the pain they had been through and hope for the future they could build together. The sound of the courtroom door opening brought Jasper back to the present. The judge entered, and everyone stood up. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Eleanor Thompson," announced the bailiff. Judge Thompson, a middle-aged woman with piercing eyes, took her seat. "We are here today to decide the custody of Aiden Reeves," she began. "I understand that we have a petition for custody from the maternal grandmother, Mrs. Margaret Hartley, contested by the father, Mr. Dominic Reeves. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," both attorneys replied. The hearing continued, with each side presenting their arguments. Mrs. Hartley's lawyer painted Dominic as a negligent father who had abandoned his sick wife and child. Jasper, for his part, presented the full truth about Sarah's illness, Dominic's efforts to help her, and how he had never given up looking for Aiden. When it was time for Aiden to speak, the boy stood up shakily. Jasper placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Aiden," Judge Thompson said gently, "can you tell us how you feel about all this?" Aiden looked at Dominic, then at his grandmother, and finally at Jasper. Taking a deep breath, he began to speak. "I spent a long time angry," he said, his voice small but firm. "Anger at my father for thinking he didn't want me. Anger at my mother for taking me away. Anger at myself for not understanding what was happening." Silent tears streamed down Dominic's face as he listened to his son. "But now," Aiden continued, "I understand more. My mother was ill, and my father was trying to help. He never stopped looking for me." Aiden turned to look at his grandmother. "Grandma, I know you love me and want to protect me, but my place is with my father. He needs me as much as I need him." Mrs. Hartley sobbed quietly, the mask of coldness finally breaking. "And Jasper," Aiden said, turning to the lawyer with a small smile. "He helped us find each other again. He's like part of our family now." Jasper felt his heart squeeze at Aiden's words. He hadn't realized how much he cared for the boy until that moment. Judge Thompson listened intently, her eyes softening visibly. When Aiden had finished, she leaned forward. "Thank you, Aiden," she said. "You're a very brave and mature young man." After a brief deliberation, Judge Thompson announced her decision. "Having heard all the testimony and considered the best interests of the child, I award full custody of Aiden Reeves to his father, Dominic Reeves." Dominic let out a sigh of relief, pulling Aiden into a tight hug. Jasper smiled, feeling a wave of emotion hit him. The judge continued, "However, I grant Mrs. Hartley visitation rights. Aiden needs all the family he can get." Mrs. Hartley nodded, tears in her eyes. For the first time since she had arrived, she looked at Dominic without hostility. When the court was adjourned, Jasper, Dominic, and Aiden left the courtroom together. The afternoon sun bathed the courthouse steps, as if celebrating a new beginning for this family. "So," Jasper said, looking at father and son, What do you want to do now?" Aiden looked up, a genuine smile lighting up his face for the first time in weeks. "Can we go stargazing? Like you promised Dad?" Dominic laughed, tears of joy in his eyes. "Of course we can, son. And Jasper," he added, looking at his friend. "You're coming with us, right?" Jasper felt a lump in his throat. "I'd love to," he managed to say. As they walked together, Jasper reflected on the journey that had brought them there. From a lawyer focused solely on his career, he had become an integral part of Aiden and Dominic's lives. He had helped bring a family together, but in the process, he had also found a family for himself. That night, lying on a blanket in a city park, Jasper, Dominic, and Aiden looked up at the stars. Aiden pointed excitedly at the constellations he recognized from the book Jasper had given him. "Look," Aiden exclaimed. "It's the Big Dipper." Dominic smiled, hugging his son. "It's beautiful," he said softly. Jasper watched the two of them, feeling a peace he hadn't experienced for years. He knew that the road ahead would still be full of challenges. Aiden still had a lot to process and heal. Dominic still carried guilt and pain, and Mrs. Hartley would still need to find her place in this new family dynamic. But looking up at the bright stars above, Jasper felt hope. Hope that, together, they could overcome any obstacle. Hope that love and understanding could heal even the deepest wounds. "Hey, Jasper," Aiden's voice brought him out of his thoughts. "Thanks for helping us find each other again." Jasper smiled, feeling tears in his eyes. "No, Aiden," he replied softly. "Thank you for helping me find myself." As the night wore on, the stars shone over the city, silent witnesses to a family rebuilt and friendships strengthened. And there, under the vast night sky, Jasper, Dominic, and Aiden found not only redemption, but also a new beginning full of endless possibilities. The future was uncertain, but now they would face it together, as a family. And for Jasper, that was more than he had ever dared to dream. I hope you were enchanted by this story. If so, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Your support is what inspires me to keep telling fascinating stories almost every day. An incredible new story is about to appear on your screen, and you won't want to miss it. Click and see you there in a few seconds. I'm very grateful that you're here with me. See you soon.